This story happened last summer. I live alone in a small house in a big neighborhood. The houses are close together, so I know most of my neighbors. The house next door to the west was for sale for a while. Finally, someone bought it. A middle-aged man moved in, but I didn't know much about him at first. As time went by, the guy seemed creepy and elusive. He always had an angry look on his face and rarely came outside. When he did, he would just stand outside, look around, or get his mail. I tried to talk to him a couple of times to be friendly, but he quickly shut down the conversations. So I decided to give him his privacy and figured he just liked being alone. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. feeling very thirsty. I went to my kitchen to get some water. While I was there, I noticed the neighbor outside, between our houses, pacing back and forth. It was strange to see him out in the middle of the night. He went back inside and came out less than a minute later. When he saw me, we made eye contact. He looked really surprised and quickly went back inside. It felt awkward, so I went back to bed. By the next day, I had forgotten all about it. I didn't see the man at all that day. The next night, I woke up again at 3 a.m., but I wasn't as thirsty. I sat up in bed, looked at the time, and then rolled over to go back to sleep. As soon as I laid down, I heard a noise. It was a small noise, like something tapping on my window. I sat back up and listened closely. The tapping continued, and then there was a much louder noise. I reached for my light switch and turned on the light. The light revealed the silhouette of a man behind the blinds, outside my bedroom window. Whoever it was quickly ran away and disappeared. I got up, walked around the house, and looked out of all my windows, but I didn't see anything strange. Eventually, I went back to my bedroom and after a while managed to fall back asleep. The next day, I checked around my yard for any evidence from the night before but couldn't find anything. Although I found these black leather shoes on my front yard. I assumed it was the old man's shoes. This really creeped me out. After that day, I never saw my next-door neighbor again. He must have left without anyone noticing, because a couple of months later, there was a for sale sign on the house. We learned that the guy hadn't been there for months. I believe it was him I saw outside my bedroom window. I don't know why he was there or what he was doing. I'm a 25-year-old woman. Last year I moved into my first house after living in an apartment for a few years. It was an older house in a neighborhood outside the city where I worked. I really liked it and was excited to have a front yard to plant flowers in and a back patio to sit and enjoy nice days. The house had 2 floors, with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. When I moved in, I saw my next-door neighbor outside in his front yard. He watched me move my stuff in while my parents and a friend helped me. At one point, he offered to help us. The guy said his name was Jerry. He came off as a little creepy to me. He was an older guy who, for whatever reason, just had a sort of scary look to him. We turned down his offer because we didn't need the help, and he went back to his front porch, where he continued to watch us. The next day, I was all moved in and by myself in my living room, watching TV. Then I heard a knock on my front door. I looked at the clock and saw that it was almost midnight. I looked out the window and noticed Jerry standing there. He was on my front step, looking directly at me, and then he waved. I didn't know he could see me through the window, and I wasn't planning on answering the door so late. But after knowing he saw me, I felt I had to. I walked over to the door and opened it. Jerry asked if I was enjoying watching TV. I told him I was just about to go to bed and asked why he was knocking on my door so late. Jerry said he wanted to invite me over for dinner the next night to welcome me to the neighborhood. I really didn't want to go, so I told him I was busy. At the time, I wasn't, but I didn't want to go to his house. He seemed disappointed, but then said maybe another time. I said yes, maybe another time, just to be nice, and then he walked away. I turned off all my lights and went to bed. I couldn't help but feel creeped out by this guy. The fact that he knew I was watching TV meant that he had looked through my window, and knocking on my door at almost midnight was really weird. The next day I went to work, and afterward got food with one of my friends. I went home around 7 p.m. When I got inside my house, I took off my shoes and began walking to my bedroom. Just then, I heard a noise coming from down the hall near the kitchen. There was definitely somebody inside my house. I heard footsteps coming towards me in the hallway and didn't want to stay there and see who it was, so I ran back to my front door, not bothering to put my shoes back on. I ran outside and got to my car. Once I was inside, I backed out of the driveway. As I started to drive away, I saw my front door open. Jerry exited my house and ran back to his. I pulled over and called the police. I sat on the other side of the road and waited for them to arrive. When they did, they went to Jerry's house and confronted him. He admitted to breaking into my house and was arrested. After that, I didn't have to worry about him anymore. A few months later, someone else moved in, and since then it's been great. Last year I lived in New Jersey for my job. I don't live there anymore because I changed companies. After moving, I found a house about 20 minutes outside of Ocean City. The area was pretty nice and I enjoyed it, but on my third night living there, something scary happened. I was in my bedroom, setting up a TV stand, when I heard noises from the other side of the house. Curious and a bit concerned, I started walking towards the sound. As I made my way through the hallway and near the dining room, I heard the back door open. This surprised me, so I backed up a few steps. I briefly heard footsteps inside my house, then the door opened and closed again. I quickly went to a side window and looked outside. I saw a man walking away quickly. He had dark brown messy hair and was about average height. I went to the back door and locked it. I wasn't sure how he got in, but I immediately called the police. They arrived soon after, but by then, the man was long gone. I gave them a description and as much information as I could, but it wasn't much to go on. I hoped the police would find whoever it was, but after they left, I wasn't too confident. I didn't feel like I gave them enough information, and I worried the man might come back. A few days later, I was outside doing yard work near the street. I noticed someone walking towards me but didn't pay much attention because I was focused on my work. When the person got closer, he didn't walk past me. Instead, he stopped and said hi. I turned around and saw it was the same man who had broken into my house. He was smiling now and asked if I had just moved in. Trying to act normal, I said yes. He was really friendly and said he lived just down the street. We talked for maybe a minute, but I couldn't keep the conversation going well for obvious reasons. I don't think he realized I had seen him that night. If he had known, why would he come up to me? After our brief chat, he walked away. I went back to the police and told them what happened. It turned out the man did live on my street, but he denied breaking into my house. Without solid evidence, there wasn't much the police could do. I installed security cameras at my front and back doors, but nothing else strange happened after that. I don't live there anymore, and I'm glad I don't have to live near that guy. I still wonder why he tried to break into my house. I used to live by myself in an apartment in the city. Almost from the very day I moved in, strange things started happening. It was like my third or fourth night there when I got a knock on my door at almost 2 o'clock in the morning. I opened it up and saw nobody there. I looked all around the hall, but there wasn't anybody in sight. The next day, I saw a magazine cover outside my door. The guy on the front of the magazine had his eyes poked out, and there was a large X over his face. I was confused and figured maybe there was a kid pranking me or something like that. Over the next few weeks, things like this continued to happen. Sometimes I would hear knocks coming from the other side of my wall in the living room. Other times, I would get knocks on my front door, or receive weird types of mail that I didn't ask for. During the day, I would occasionally see people coming or going from their apartments. The guy that lived next door to me was a younger-looking adult, and seemed like just an average guy. One day as I was leaving, I thought I saw him approaching my door. When I stepped outside, he quickly walked back inside his room and slammed the door when he saw me. I noticed he appeared to be holding a magazine, or something like that, in his hand, and based on the evidence, I thought he might be behind the things that were happening. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I decided to go to his apartment and confront him. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't sure he was behind it, but at the time, I was about 90% sure. I was nervous but tired of the weird things happening and wanted them to stop. So the next day I went over there. I knocked on his door and he answered it, looking sort of confused. He had curly hair and glasses and asked what I wanted. I told him I was his next door neighbor and pointed to my room. He said, "Yeah, I know." I told him about the strange things happening to me and mentioned how I had seen him look like he was about to put something on my front step. He completely denied everything. I asked him if someone else lived with him who might be responsible. The man told me he lived in his apartment by himself and had been there for several years. He didn't appreciate me accusing him of this stuff. He suggested maybe I was just going crazy, and then slammed the door in my face. I was pretty disappointed with how it went talking to him, and went back to my apartment feeling pretty embarrassed. I realized it wasn't a very good plan to confront the guy. After that, the strange things kept continuing. I got a few more random pieces of paper at my front step, some with red X's on them, others with curse words probably directed at me. Then one night, I got a knock on my door very late at night, and of course, nobody was there. A few minutes later, I heard distinct knocking coming from the other side of my wall that was 100% coming from the man's apartment. I was so angry that I stormed over and started pounding on his door. I kept knocking and yelled for him to open up, but the man wouldn't answer. A few minutes later, the door across the hall opened and a woman wearing pajamas came out. She looked like she had just woken up and asked me what I was doing. I explained the situation to her, and she told me that the guy who lives there, his name was Mike, had left the day before and was out of town for a week. When I heard this, I didn't know what to do. I felt bad for waking the woman up, told her sorry, and went back to my apartment. I decided after that to just move out. I stayed there for a few more weeks. Strange things happened up until about a week before I moved, and then it stopped. I'm glad I don't live there anymore because it was very weird. My name is Denise, and I used to live in an older apartment close to the city. I lived there for 1 year. During that time, I got to know a couple of my neighbors, but not many. I would see some people around the building or in the hallways, but I never really talked to most of them. After living there for almost a year, something odd happened. It was really late at night on a Friday. I was staying up late watching a movie by myself. All the lights were off, and I was eating popcorn when suddenly I heard someone trying to enter my apartment. The front doorknob was rattling, which startled me. I paused the movie and listened closely. The doorknob turned several times. I expected someone to knock, but they didn't. Whoever was there tried opening the door again. I got up as quietly as I could and tiptoed over to my front door. It wasn't far away, and when I looked out the peephole, I saw a guy standing right outside. He appeared to be looking closely at the doorknob or lock area, so I couldn't see his face at first. As I leaned my face against the door, it moved a little bit. When it did, the guy outside backed up, and I saw his face. It was one of my neighbors. I didn't know his name, but we had said hi to each other a couple of times in the hallway. I knew he lived on my floor, across the hall, about 4 doors down. After he backed up, I saw him walk away back toward his place. I was kind of creeped out. Why was he trying to get into my apartment? I stayed up for a while and looked outside my door a few more times. I never saw him again that night. I finally went to sleep around 3 a.m. The next morning, I woke up at about 9. When I left my bedroom, I thought I heard something at my front door again. I wasn't sure if I was just paranoid now, but I walked over and looked out. The same guy was there, my neighbor. He tried opening the door again. When it didn't open, he turned around and walked away. I tried to make sense of it, but had no idea what he was doing. A couple of days later, I was leaving for work and happened to see my neighbor walking in my direction. We were going to cross paths in the hallway. I wanted to turn around and go back to my place, but decided not to. When we were about 10 feet from each other, we made eye contact. He said hi and told me he had gone to my door the other night. He said he didn't know if he woke me up, but that he had accidentally tried to enter my apartment. He apologized and explained that he had gotten back from the bars with friends and was a little drunk. I told him it was all right and that I understood. We went our separate ways, but I didn't really understand. At first, it made perfect sense, and I felt relieved. But after thinking more about it, I realized he didn't seem drunk when he was messing around with my door. The way he was messing with it was like he was trying to break in, not like he thought he lived there. And even if he was just drunk, why did he come back and try to get in again the next morning? I didn't think he would still be drunk and wander back to my apartment at 9 a.m. I tried to tell myself I was making more of it than it was and that he was telling the truth. A few more days went by. It was late at night again, and I was in my bedroom on my phone. It was probably about 11 o'clock when I heard a knocking at my door. It was quiet, but I heard it. I got up, walked over to the door, and looked outside. The same guy was back. As I was looking out the peephole, he knocked again. When he knocked, I accidentally bumped the door forward with my head. My place was old, and the door would rattle in the hinges easily if you touched it. When the door moved slightly, the guy quickly ducked around the corner. Everyone's doorway went in a little, so if you hid around the corner right in front of it, you couldn't be seen. I wasn't sure what he was doing, but I didn't like it at all. I kept watching, and after about 30 seconds, he moved back into view and knocked again. I stayed still and didn't move. He knocked once more and then finally left. I didn't know what he wanted, but I had a bad feeling about it. Less than a month later, I moved out of that apartment, and I'm glad I did.